again, and if there are any children watching, I've got something I think you might like, because in front of me here I've got chocolate pudding and chocolate sauce, and when I was a child that was my very favourite pudding. And that heralds today's programme, which is all about puddings, and I know that a lot of people are on diets and puddings have become rather unfashionable, but we still spend a lot of money on confectionery, and that's going up in price a lot, and I don't think it's half as nice as proper homemade puddings. So I'd rather give that a slip and have a good homemade pudding once in a while. Well, this chocolate pudding, as I've told you, is with a chocolate sauce, and the nice thing about it is, I'm going to show you a piece now, because the nice thing about it is that you bake the pudding and you have the chocolate sauce all in one go. So you don't have to make them both separately. And that's really gooey and sticky and nice. And now I'm just going to show you how to do that. Well, you start off, you need a nice large mixing bowl, lots of room to play. And I've got 4 ingredients here. I've got 2 ounces of fine semolina, 2 ounces of cocoa powder, a teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoonful of ground cinnamon, and some caster sugar. Now these have to be sifted. I've sifted them beforehand because I wanted you to see them separately. But when you put them into the bowl, you should sift them so that you get rid of any lumps and then just mix them all together. So that's the first bit of the recipe. The next bit is you need some liquid to mix the first part of the pudding with. And over here in my jug, I've got 2 beaten eggs. And I'm just going to add something to those eggs, and that is some vanilla essence, half a teaspoon of vanilla essence. And I think I've said this before, but I will remind you, there's a lot of bogus vanilla essence on the market, and it doesn't taste as good as the real stuff. So if you're buying vanilla essence, do try and get hold of the real pure vanilla essence made from a vanilla pod. And now the next thing that goes in there is, here I've got 1 ounce of melted butter. I'm just going to mix that in with the egg yolks, and then that goes into the first 5 dry ingredients. Now all that's going to need is quite a bit of stirring. What's nice about this pudding is that you don't have any creaming or adding eggs bit by bit, it's all just mixed in one go. So that's it. That's the pudding bit mixed, and that goes into a very well buttered, as you can see there, 1.5 pint baking dish. And you just scrape that all into the baking dish using a rubber spatula, which will get every scrap out. I haven't got time to get every scrap out, but you'll be able to spend more time than me in the leisure of your kitchen. So that's really the pudding part. And now the chocolate sauce part. Sorry, I've forgotten one ingredient to go in there, and that's walnuts. So I'm just going to put the walnuts in. There are 1 ounce of walnuts there, and I should have put those in just a minute ago, and I didn't. So I'll put them in now, which just goes to show that you don't have to worry when you forget things. They can always go in at the last minute. But it's a good reason for having everything weighed out, because then you can have a glance around, as I did, and see them waiting there before you start. Now for the chocolate sauce. And here, in my other mixing bowl, I've got half an ounce of cocoa powder plus 2 teaspoonfuls and 3 ounces of soft brown sugar. And these have both been sifted. And again, it is important to sift them because they do get very lumpy otherwise. And even though they're sifted now, the lumps of sugar under the hot lights here get very sticky. Now I've got here, measured out, half a pint of hot water. So that goes in first of all. A little drop, just to slacken off the mixture. I must say this is one of the easiest puddings too on record. I think you can whip this up in about 5 minutes flat. There we are. Now the rest of the water in. And all you do with that now is you just pour that over the rest of the pudding Then you put it in a medium oven, gas mark 4, 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then just dust it with a bit of icing sugar before you take it to the table. Well, I think you'll agree that's one of the easiest, quickest puddings in the world. It's deliciously gooey and a great family favourite. And you can change the nuts if you want to. You can use different sorts of nuts, or you could even use raisins instead of nuts to ring the changes. Well, that's chocolate pudding and chocolate sauce. Now I'd like to move on to a really old-fashioned, traditional English type of pudding, a steamed pudding, you know, the sort that Granny used to make. Well, we've got a pudding steaming away there, but first of all, I'd like to show you the mixture. Now, this is what I call rich fig pudding. The fruit you use can be figs or any other sort of fruit, and it's a good one if you want a last-minute Christmas pudding and you forgot to make them. It's also a good one for using up leftover ingredients after Christmas, the sort of dried fruits that you have around. But first of all, the dry ingredients before the fruits. And I've got here 4 ounces of shredded suet, 2 ounces of self-raising flour, and I will have, in a moment, 6 ounces of fresh breadcrumbs, but I've only got 5 ounces of fresh breadcrumbs here. That's because I wanted to show you a good way to make breadcrumbs. It used to be such a bore having to grate them on a grater and finding that you'd grated your knuckles in with them. But with today's modern liquidizers, it's very, very easy to make breadcrumbs. In fact, they can be made in seconds. So I left 1 ounce of my bread over so that I could show you how to make breadcrumbs in a liquidizer. If you haven't got one and you're thinking about buying one, I think this is one of the very good reasons. Switch the motor on and just pour in bits of bread. Put your hand over the top to stop any escaped crumbs, and there we are. It's a very, very quick way to make breadcrumbs, and I think one of the good reasons for having a liquidizer. So there's our 6 ounces, and there's quite a high proportion of breadcrumbs to flour. That's because breadcrumbs make steamed puddings really light. So if you find an old recipe that Grandmother used to make, and you want to make it a bit lighter, take away some of the flour and add breadcrumbs instead, and you'll have a nice, really light pudding. And sometimes it's better just to put the spoon down and just go in with your hands if you find the mixture looks a bit lumpy, rather like pastry. That's because my little bits of shredded suet have got rather warm and they've clung together a bit. Well, now we're going to add the fruit. First of all, I've got 8 ounces of stoned chopped dates, and that's the sort of size you chop them to, although it's not vital, just roughly chopped. Then here I've got 6 ounces of chopped figs, and again I'll just show you the size that they're chopped to. And then I've got 3 ounces of raisins, they're going in next, lots of really good things. And now a very special thing, and that is 2 ounces of chopped preserved ginger. And preserved ginger is very expensive, but I think it's well worth having a jar in the cupboard for things like this. It's also very nice in cakes. Now mix all the fruits together, and again, to save time, I'm going to mix them with my hands. And then we're going to add, after that, some spices. Now the spices I'm going to use are first of all half a teaspoonful of mixed spice, just roughly half a teaspoon. Then another spice, and I'm going to do a bit of showing off here because I've got a rather special nutmeg grater. This is a copy of an 18th century nutmeg grater, and the 18th century gentleman used to carry one of these around in his pocket. It's got enough space to hold 1 nutmeg in it. Well, then you take the top off, and the other end has got the all-essential part, and that's the grater. And I'm very glad that 18th century gentlemen were wise, and they used freshly grated nutmeg, because I can't emphasise that often enough. It's really no good at all when you buy ready ground nutmeg. It just doesn't have half or even 75% of the flavour. There we are then. So there's the nutmeg. a good proportion of nutmeg, about half a nutmeg grated. Now I'm going to add the zest of an orange. That's the grated outer zest of an orange. And while I'm about that, I've got another little gadget to show you. And this is a very modest little gadget, but I think a very useful thing to have. This is called an orange or lemon zester. And what it does is it extracts the orange zest, which is the outer bit, without taking off the pith, very easily, very simply, and there's very, very little waste. It's also very good, you know, if you've got an awkward shaped lemon and you're trying to get into the corners, it's quite good for that. So that's a very modest piece of equipment, doesn't cost very much money, but quite a useful thing to have, I think. Well, now the liquid that's going to go in this mixture is 3 eggs beaten, the juice of the orange that we've just taken the zest off, and also 2 tablespoons of brandy. Now, if you're a teetotaler and you don't want to have any brandy in, then don't worry. You can just make it up with extra orange juice, or you can use a drop of milk or something like that. But brandy would be nice. Now, what that's going to need now is quite a bit of mixing. I should give it about 3 minutes mixing so that it's really very, very thoroughly mixed. But I won't have time for that. Never mind, I'm going to show you a finished rich fig pudding. But first of all, I want to talk about the way it's cooked. It's steamed for 4 hours, and the way it's steamed is in one of these here, which is an old-fashioned steamer, and this is set over a saucepan of boiling water. Now, it's quite a good idea to use a steamer, because you can steam a pudding by placing it right down in the water. But sometimes the water gets over the top and floods the pudding, and also it needs a lot of watching and a lot of topping up. Now, this pudding, which will have been steamed for 4 hours, I've given this 1 top up, and that is important. When you're steaming, just have a look, see how the water's going, and if it's boiling away, then give it a top up with more boiling water. Anyway, we'll take the pudding off now, and I'll show you the covering in a second. Turn out the heat, but just show you a steamer, which is really like a saucepan with perforations in the bottom. And it's quite useful, this, in the summer too, for steaming asparagus or spinach or something that doesn't need cooking with water. Well, there we are. Now I want to explain a little bit about the covering on a steam pudding. It's covered with a double sheet of foil, and I've left a lot of foil over the edge here because it's easy to take it out. You can lift it out with the foil, and for some reason or another, you don't get the heat from the foil. Now, it's also got a pleat in it, and if you pleat the foil, butter it underneath and pleat it, it allows room for the pudding to expand. So now I'm just going to take off the string and take off the covering. In the old-fashioned days, they used to use pudding cloths, but they had to be laundered, and now it's much, much easier to use foil. Slide a palette knife round the pudding before you turn it out. And then take a cloth, because it's very hot, before you turn it out onto a plate, and have a warm plate waiting. There we are. Now I'm going to take a piece out of it. It's a very rich pudding, so you only need small portions. And this is a good knife too, which I'd like to show you. It's a palette knife, which has got a lot of flexibility in it, but it's also got a serrated edge, so you can cut with it as well. So I'll just take a portion out now, and as I said before, not too much, because it is very, very rich. And I'll just put that over on the plates, have the plates warm, ready. Now, that would be very nice with a pouring sauce. A rum sauce would be lovely with it. Or this, which I've got over here, this is Cumberland rum butter. And this is exactly like brandy butter, only it's made with brown sugar and rum instead of white sugar and brandy. And that would be very nice, just melted over the pudding to eat with it. Well, now, the next pudding I'm going to show you, I'm not going to make any apologies for. Some of you will say how ordinary, but some people get a glazed look when you mention this one, and that's bread and butter pudding. It's very, very popular, I think, and I'd like to see a lot more of it. Well, you start off with a well-buttered 2-pint baking dish like this, and 8 slices of bread, not too thin, not too thick, and leave the crusts on because they're important. And then you just put a layer of the slices of bread and butter in your baking dish, and then you add a few other things. Well, first of all, I've got 2 ounces of currants here, and I'm going to put 1 ounce of currants in. And here I've got ½ ounce of chopped candied peel. You can leave it out if you don't like candied peel and add a few more currants, but I think it really does add to the flavour. And one tip I'd like to give you about candied peel is if you can buy whole candied peel and cut it up yourself, it does have 50% more flavour than the ready chopped candied peel. Now I've got here the grated zest of a lemon, which is also very important to the flavour. And then I'm just going to put the rest of the bread on top. Just any old how will do. Press it down, put the rest of the currants and candied peel, sprinkle them all over. And then the liquid I'm going to use is, first of all, in my basin here, I've got ½ pint of milk, and then here I've got 1/8 of a pint of double cream. And the double cream really does give it an extra special flavour. So beat the double cream into the milk, then add 2 ounces of sugar and 3 eggs beaten. And they're beaten first, and then they go in with the rest of the mixture. And now that mixture is just poured all over the rest of the ingredients. Be quite careful with it so that you get everything covered and soaked properly with it. And now just one more ingredient, and a very, very important ingredient, because I do think a bread and butter pudding should have rather a lot of freshly grated nutmeg, again on the top. A nice toasted nutmeg crust is a very essential part. Now that goes into a preheated oven, gas mark 4, 375 degrees, and it'll take ½ an hour to cook. And guess what? We have one that's had ½ an hour in the oven, so we'll just take that out now and have a look at it. What's nice about a bread and butter pudding is that it just comes up really, really risen and sort of very, very light and fluffy, and then it has that lovely sort of toasted nutmeg crust on the top. It really is one of the most delicious puddings in the world, and I do hope you'll try that. Well, that's rich bread and butter pudding, and the recipe for that comes from an 18th century cookbook by a lady called Eliza Acton. A lot of her recipes are really delicious. She's a great cookery writer. Well, now I'm going to move on to another old-fashioned English favourite. Again, I think this is neglected, and this is an apple charlotte, a proper moulded apple charlotte. Now, you have 6 slices of bread for this, and you cut them into rectangles, and you butter them on both sides with melted butter and use them to line a 1-pint pudding basin. And I've got the pudding basin almost lined, but I'm going to just finish off now, and all you do is have some melted butter ready, 3 ounces of melted butter, and you use a pastry brush and paint butter on each side. And then you find it gets nice and squidgy, and you can mould it completely the way you want to, just by pressing it. Now, the important thing to remember on this is to have the basin really very, very well lined and no gaps at all. And it's quite a good idea, if you've got an odd piece, to stick it right down in the base at the bottom here, so you've got a good solid top at the bottom. Now I've got a mixture of apples here. I've got 1 pound of apples. Now these have been sliced and cooked with a tablespoon of sugar, 1 ounce of butter. And I'd like to explain the apple mixture. It's actually half Cox's and half Bramley's, because in fact that gives you the very best apple flavour at all. And then after the apples were cooked, I let them cool. I cooked them to a puree, and then I let them cool, and then I added 1 beaten egg yolk which binds the mixture together. So there's the apple filling. Now we're going to do a little bit of patchwork on the top with the rest of the bread. So you carry on painting the bread with melted butter, and then you fit the pieces of bread on the top. And don't worry if you've got all sorts of odd shapes. You can now start to cut them up if you want to, and just fit them completely so that you've got a very, very well secured casing of apple pulp. Now I haven't quite finished that because I haven't got the time, but just make sure that you've got no gaps and then press it down well. Now the next stage, once you've got the pudding lined and the top on, is that you put a plate on the top, approximately the size of the pudding, and you just press it down, and to press it down even more, you place a weight on the top. Now a 2-pound weight would be ideal, but we've got here a 1 kilogram weight, and we haven't talked about metrication so far in the cookery course, but all the recipes have been given with metric conversions, and there is a chart very carefully worked out in the front of the book. So the rule to remember really with metrication is never mix them, either do one or the other. Anyway, there's my 1 kilogram weight, or you can use a 2-pound weight. Now you put that in a very hot oven, gas mark 6, 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you cook it for 30 minutes. Then you take the plate and the weight off, and you leave it for another 10 minutes so the top can get nice and crisp. And we've got one that's up to that stage now, so we'll just now have a look at apple charlotte. It's actually sizzling away inside there, and it should be nice and toasted and crusty around the edges. That was the idea of all that butter. Now the next thing you do is you take a palette knife, slide it around the edge, holding it with a cloth because it is very, very hot, and then you turn the pudding out onto a waiting plate. And what I'm going to do, in fact, is put the plate on top first and then just switch it upside down like that. Now I'm going to give you a word of warning here, because ideally an apple charlotte should turn out absolutely perfectly and you can carry it to the table. But sometimes, unfortunately, the walls collapse and the apple puree bursts out. But that doesn't matter, because that just means you can divide it up before it goes to the table and it will taste the same. So that's apple charlotte, and I think that's nice served with some chilled pouring cream. Well, the recipe for apple charlotte and all the other puddings are contained in the book that goes with the series, plus the metric chart that I talked about earlier on. And also, for those of you who have centigrade ovens, we have given all the centigrade temperatures as well. Well, I've had 1 or 2 letters from people saying to me, now what happens to all that food? You know, you rehearse all day and then you do the recording. Does it get thrown away? Do you take it home? Well, today I'm going to actually show you what happens to all the food. But before that, I'll just say goodbye and God bless. And now's the moment.